Hey everyone, welcome to the Generational Cursing Podcast. We are a father and son duo who are both pastors in slightly different contexts, and we like talking about all things church-related. Quick spoiler, we don't actually curse, it's just a joke. If you could take a second, subscribe to this channel on whatever platform you're listening, leave us a rating or a comment, that would be hugely appreciated. And if you have any thoughts or feedback, feel free to email us at generationalcursingpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening. Here's our conversation for today.
Welcome to our podcast.
Oh,
My name is Dave, and this is my son, Ben.
it's really extra.
Yeah, that
probably
was unnecessary.
Way more than we need. I would like to note that for my entire life growing up, I would come down the stairs in the morning, and there would just be Folgers coffee brewed, and you would drink nothing but black coffee.
No, you're wrong on that. No.
You only ever took. Oh, you put sugar. You put sweet and low in it, didn't you?
I didn't drink coffee most of your life. Well, maybe your life.
My life.
I didn't start drinking coffee until we moved to Cedar Rapids. But then again, you were
I was a year
little
old.
kid.
Yes. Okay. Let's get the time. But I just want to appreciate
Bill Ulmer
that you are full. You currently use like the peppermint frou.
You know when that happened?
Like a man
In
drinking black
2018, coffee. When I had like 412 surgeries on my midsection.
Yeah, you were unable to drink.
Since then, the acid of coffee kind of gets to me. So I used to make fun of people who put creamers and stuff in, called them foo-foo drinks, and used to ridicule them.
Yeah.
And now I have to kind of calm down the acid of my drinks.
Yeah, well, it must be tough to just be...
No longer be a man?
Yeah, I know. This is toxic masculinity at its finest.
Yes. Do you know, though, I did notice, speaking of coffee, that I got some... I have to drink decaf now. After my surgery in November, which has enabled me to lose about 75 pounds. But they didn't want me to drink caffeinated coffee anymore. Mm-hmm. I could really start drinking a little bit again. But I started researching decaf, and one of the ones I found, they actually named the coffee after me.
Oh,
it's a maker called Maud, M-A-U-D, and they named a brand after me, Tall, Dark, and Handsome.
Yeah.
Tall, Dark, and Handsome coffee. I mean, they named it after me. So
That's a great punchline.
Do we have a...
That's a great punchline. No, we have no sound effects. We have this is as low
I
production
still feel a little punchy after I've been, we were moving along pretty good, getting these podcasts up. We haven't released. We're recording it. I don't know if it's our 9th or 10th podcast.
I don't actually know.
But we haven't released a single one yet.
Most of them are uploaded.
Yeah, they're uploaded. They haven't been. They haven't. We've got to have our launch. Our grand opening where I'll wear a clown suit and. But I spent most of 2 weeks, week and a half in Africa, and.
Can you tell me about just the experience of being a large, no offense, but old white man in the middle of Africa?
It is different.
You're in Western Africa, right? You're in Senegal.
South Africa,
and then you
West Africa.
Yeah, you kind of hike out to the sticks.
Senegal is, if you ever look on a map of Africa, you can see Senegal immediately, because West Africa is the kind of hump.
Yeah.
And there's a place where it looks like a kind of a zit on the there's a little thing that sticks out. That is the capital city. That's Dakar.
Okay.
And we fly into Dakar, and then we take another plane down to the southern edge of a place called Ziguinchor. We get a car, and we go out into the villages. Yeah, we just go from village to village and walk up to people's houses and go Kong, Kong, Kong. That's how you knock on doors. You don't actually knock on doors. You just walk up and
you say
Kong, Kong, Kong. And you yell out,
Kong, Kong,
Kong, Kong, Kong. And that's how you knock on doors. And then you ask people if you can tell them stories about the Bible and talk to them about Jesus.
Well, I'm glad you had a wonderful time. And like even post-surgery, I mean, it was probably still hot, but it wasn't.
This is dry season there. In fact, when we flew in, we thought that it was overcast. We thought that there was a haze. It wasn't. It was just dust.
Oh,
they had
they haven't had rainy season.
They had a dry rainy season. They didn't have a good rainy season.
Gotcha.
And their dry season's been brutal. So, like one day, I thought, look at this, clouds rolling in. I wonder if it's going to rain. And our
sandstorm.
Alioun. Well, it was basically a dust. They don't have dust. It wasn't a dust storm as such, but it was just dust.
Yeah.
And it it looked like clouds, but it's just clouds of dust. I mean, this is a little gross for the podcast, but I was blowing dust out of my nose for days after we got back. I don't know how much dust I breathed into my lungs, but it was, but no, I thought it was my 12th trip when I came back and counted. Every time I've taken pictures and I've grouped them by the dates, so I could go back and count, and it was actually my 11th trip to Senegal.
Gotcha.
All to the same village. Well, mostly to the same villages.
The same region.
All to the same Casamance, they call it. Okay. It's a river. The Casamance is a huge river in southern Senegal, and to the same people group. I've started transitioning a little bit to teaching pastors.
Sure.
Because I realize I'm not getting any younger. And even though I started to say, in the dry season, it gets cool at night. Mm-hmm. Now, I've been there in the fall, when at 1 o'clock in the morning it might still be 90 degrees with 90% humidity, and it's horrific. It's like trying to sleep in a sauna.
Yeah,
in a not a sauna, but
I don't know.
What's the sauna with the?
This doesn't mean anything to me. For those just listening, Dad's just waving his hands in the air. He's just. You know that thing. The thing
they always have it on TV shows where everybody goes in and there's
on TV. You know the thing on that one
it's
thing on
foggy
TV.
And everybody sits there with towels. Not the hot tub, but the hot room with the sauna. The sauna. No, the sauna is the hot room with dry. It's dry. The steam room, the steam bath.
I think that's just called a sauna.
Yeah, I think you're wrong.
Whatever. It's fair.
There's a reason why the motto to this show is "I'm right and you're wrong." Okay, whatever. But it's just like, it's 90 degrees at 1 in the morning with 90% humidity. It's hard to sleep because where we go, there is no electricity and no running water. It's just, but now electricity is being brought into that village. So the next time we go, might be able to bring a fan.
Are they doing solar, or how are they doing? Are they running power lines? Or?
I bring solar. I have a solar battery, a solar charger. I brought that in there, but the next time, because I have a CPAP, I have to use at night. But by the next time, I think the house where I stay, he's going to have electrical running. I helped him out a little. I normally I don't pay for stuff like that, because one of the things you can really do that messes up ministry is start funding too much stuff. Right. Then you become not a minister, but you become a bank, and it's a real. But
Christian sugar daddy.
For the cost of one of those solar batteries, we could put electricity in his house.
Sure.
And I'm like, those solar batteries wear out after a few trips.
Sure.
And I'm like, and they're hard to, it's like it's the size of a car battery.
Jeez.
And when it's in my suitcase, they always. Yeah. I got on the trip home. I had to bring one of them home.
TSA probably gives you a good time.
Well, it's not the TSA. It's the African version of TSA. Yeah. They're like, what is this thing? They made me open my bag up, and I had to.
It looks like a bun.
And I don't speak their language, so I'm trying to show them my CPAP, and I'm going through all these hand motions.
Speaking because they speak French, like.
Well, no, they're probably speaking Jolacasa or something, or Wolof or something like that. There's like 7 different languages.
Sure.
We did a song one time at a church service, the first church service in the buyout region that was ever held. This was before I started going into the Essene region, which is too long of a.
Sure.
We sang a song.
We're all following, by the way. We all totally get it.
I'm telling you, I started, my friend Bart Barber, who will be the next president of the Southern Baptist Convention. Vote Bart if you're a Southern Baptist.
About it. I was going to run. I was going to give him a run for his money. I was going to finally get the Holy Spirit.
Well, some people were suggesting I ran, and I suggested let's get Bart to run.
And I would say, have you ever seen him
run?
And
I contacted Bart. See, now that's just hurtful. That was just her. I may have to sign off the podcast.
No, it's fine.
But then Bart agreed to run, and I was so happy, because if he hadn't run, I might have been running, and that, like you say, that would have been ugly. But no, Bart will win. He'll be the next president. But he needed someone to go. He's working with a group called the Buyout, and they have cousins who are like, 8 kilometers, 5 miles up the road. And they're called the Essene, and that's the group I work with, 7 villages. I think Bart has 7 villages. I have 7 villages. And they speak essentially the same language. It's called Jola Bayat.
Okay.
But there's like everybody is supposed to speak French except the older people. A lot of them don't speak French. Then there's Jolakasa, Jolabayat. Wolof is the language that a lot of the Muslims speak.
Sure.
There's Fulani. There's all the little tribes have their different languages. But I started to say we sang this song.
Yeah.
I can't remember what the song was. It was a little
praise
praise 7-Eleven type praise chorus.
Sure.
Real simple little praise chorus. But they literally sang it. I think I counted 6 different languages. They sang it in English for me and Matt, who was my friend that went with me. Yeah. This was back in 2016. They sang it. No, Bart. They sang it in French. They sang it in English. I think Matt and Bart and I were all there. They sang it in Wolof. They sang it in Jolabayat. They sang it in Jolakasa. And there's one. They sang it in like 5 or 6 different. Took like 12 hours just to sing this little, praise chorus.
And this is where you and I will differ. I think there's nothing wrong with that kind of repetition.
No, you had to just sing it in a language everybody. But I've done translations where we're telling a Bible story. That's what we do. Is we tell Bible stories.
Did you pray for the power to interpret, or
no? I have an interpreter with me. It's called Aliun.
Okay, good.
But he's actually had to interpret 2 or 3 times in one little setting. He'll speak, and then it'll be interpreted. And sometimes we have to use. So we could use the gift of tongues actually.
Well, if you would just let me lay my hands on you real quick.
Yeah. You're so funny. Why don't you come with me sometime and just see what it's like?
That one of the funniest parts. It's not funny, but one of the parts about.
You come with me and we'll see how good you do.
The early AG missions, they did that. There were some people who were so convinced that the gift of tongues would do that.
And then the next time
they just shipped them out to India or to Africa or to China.
And then the next time they brought translators along.
Let's just say that's not AG World Missions.
No longer the strategy.
That is no longer the strategy.
Yeah.
So I have a computer that's.
But by the way, we did pray quite often for healing for people. We do pray for healing quite a bit,
I think
and pray against demons and all. I get semi-charismatic on these trips, except so far we've had some pretty amazing things. I mean that thing in the airport coming back was.
Oh yeah.
Was fairly.
You got to tell the Red Sea story.
The Red Sea. We were coming back.
Nothing to do with the geographic Red Sea.
No, we were coming back, and you have to get on the airplane. CDC rule. We were flying Delta. Mm-hmm. You have to get a COVID test.
Negative COVID test.
A negative COVID test. Yeah. We got our COVID tests on Friday morning because we had to get on an airplane Saturday morning. So we got our COVID tests on Friday. We were hoping to fly Saturday evening up to Dakar, the capital city, where the main airport is, but they couldn't get us on that flight, so we ended up flying Saturday morning. So we had to take our COVID test on Friday. Mm-hmm. We got up there, and we waited around 14 hours in the airport, which was dull and boring, but we finally got ready to go into the thing, and they said, these COVID tests are no good because our flight took off just after midnight. So that put our flight on the 3rd.
Midnight. It's technically Sunday.
Our flight was on the 3rd, and our tests were on the 1st, and the test had to be the day before.
Yeah, even though it was less.
It wasn't less than 24 hours, but it had to be the day before. So we were checking in on the 2nd, but
it was less than 24 hours before your previous when the flight was supposed to take off.
It was then our first flight, but our first flight was on Senegal Air. Air Senegal instead of on Delta. So it was our first Delta flight.
Got it.
So it was kind of a glitch. And so I said, well, can I talk? I need to go talk to Delta. I went to talk to the Delta office. They said, can't help you. Go talk to Miss C, who is the head honcho for the whole flight.
She's El Jefe.
She's El Jefe. She said, no, that's a CDC rule. I mean, we can't help you.
It's a government
problem. So we stood there, and I said, well, I've got a Delta app. And they have this thing where you can load your stuff by Delta app. So Matt Widman and I were there, and I loaded both of our things on the Delta app. Matt's was approved immediately. Mine wasn't approved. It just said pending. So I showed them Matt's is approved, and they said, well, he can get on. I'm shortening this. It lasted a long time.
Well, I mean,
I haven't told the good part of the story. I was getting really frustrated when they first denied us. I was really getting angry. I'd been sitting in the airport for 14 hours.
I've been on plenty of road trips with you. It's even a mild inconvenience. Well, it can sour. One slow driver in the fast lane.
I'm still mad about that comment about running.
I can't imagine 18 hours in an airport.
14 hours, but
sure, yeah.
I was getting really frustrated, and I was starting to kind of find myself wanting to snap at these people, and I realized, I'm a missionary, short term, but I'm a missionary. I can't do that, and so I started praying, and I sensed this sort of message from the Lord. I know some of my friends won't believe this.
I'm here for this.
Yeah, but I just sensed this, that first of all, I can't get mad. I can't lose my cool, but that I should make this a public thing. I should make this a public prayer. And so I posted a prayer on Facebook. I'd already called your mom and told her that we were in deep trouble, and she was praying with your wife and your mother-in-law.
Yes,
they were over, and
at her house.
So, but I posted a prayer. I said, Lord, on Facebook, I said, Lord, you parted the Red Sea. I'm asking you to part the red tape. It just kind of popped in my mind, and I just said, Lord, I'm asking you to part the red tape. And it was soon after that I had this idea about going on the Delta app, which took a long time because the Wi-Fi there was terrible. Sure, yeah. But I finally got it to go through, and Matt's came back almost immediately. They said, Matt can get on. Mm-hmm. And Matt was reluctant to get on, but I said, just get on, go. One of us.
If you can, you may as well go.
Just go. And so he finally got on the plane, got through security, got on the plane. And I waited there. The plane was an hour late.
Oof.
Or I wouldn't have gone on.
Yeah, I would say which.
But I just waited and waited and waited, and I showed them. And I at one point I thought I'd gotten approval, and I showed it to them, and it wasn't. So I went back and I waited and waited and waited. And finally, they said they've closed the security gate. No one else is getting through. And I went over to Mrs. C, and I talked to her a couple of times. I'd been really respectful, and I said, is it true that they're not letting anyone else through? And she just looked at me, and she said, go. She just sort of did this. Go. Just go. Just go.
Yeah.
And I just sort of floated through, and they let me on. The guys who had been, how
take it to the CDC.
That's what I like to see. Petty functionaries. These guys are. You can't go. You can't.
Whose job it is
kind
to
of trying.
yell at people.
You cannot go. You cannot go. You do not have clearance. All of a sudden, this guy's carrying my bags and helping me through. And
that's the power.
And
of
it's like
man.
It's like all the Red Sea parted, the red tape parted, and these guys are helping me through.
Come on.
And I went and all of a sudden I was standing in line. You have to go through this customs thing, and this guy said, "Here, come with me." I don't know who this guy was. Turns out he wanted money. I gave him $5,000.
Sure,
5,000 safe is like $8 or $9.
Yeah, that's a tip.
But he said, "Come with me. I'll show you a different line." And he took me past this line of people waiting to get through to this line where there was nobody waiting, and I got through in about a minute, and everybody was happy and laughing. And then he took me to the security line, and I gave him $5,000, which he probably wanted more, but I'm like, I just handed him a $5,000.
Yeah,
and then I got through, and I walked up, and of course,
Matt give you a big kiss when you got on the plane? Or
well, I joked that Matt was going to kiss me, but he was glad to see me, I'll tell you. But anyway, I was just like, the Red Sea parted for us, and there was it was just amazing. But anyway, let's get on. Let's get on with this today. And
well, if you notice, we're in different clothes. If you're watching this, we had a technical issue, so here we are.
Which was all your fault, right?
Yeah, you could say that.
And the tragedy of this is that we had some of the world has lost some of the greatest wisdom.
Yeah.
In our conversation,
because
we may have
the whole time.
I don't remember that. I don't remember that.
I do.
That's a matter of some discussion and
debate.
Debate.
Well, here's what I want to do for today. I have an idea. Bear with me. So we've gone 1 through 8, one at a time.
Yes.
And I would like us just to talk.
On number 9.
I'm going to loop number 9, number 10, and 11 together. Here we go.
I don't want to do that.
Yes, you do. You do because I say you do, and you just have to roll. So
who
here we
died
go.
and left you, boss?
Number 9 is about sanctification. Number 10 is about the church and its mission. And number 11 is about church ministry in general. So what I would like to do is let's just zoom out. It's called oppositional defiant disorder. I'm
but I don't think the parent can have that. I think the child has to have that.
Well, at times, the child seems like a good descriptor.
Whatever.
Anyway. But
see, you're making me mad
now.
So
all of this, in general, when you just kind of zoom out a little bit, is about making disciples, the role of the church in society, and how we do church. And I think that's an interesting place where we don't necessarily differ theologically, but we certainly exist in slightly different church spheres.
Well, certainly.
So what do you
stylistically? I do know one of the things we discussed on the part that was in terms of sanctification. One of the things that I did talk about that I think is important is that the whole holiness. One of the because I've been studying church history. And one of the roots of the Pentecostal movement, it grew out of the holiness movement. And the holiness movement had a second blessing unto
salvation?
Sanctification. The term sanctification, they believed that you had a second blessing that produced a sinless perfection. You stopped sinning. You had, be of sin the double cure, save from wrath, and make me pure. Now, you can sing that without believing that, you become sinless.
I'll put you at ease there that when the AG now says sanctification, we don't mean
no,
that.
but I'm just saying that was one of the, the holiness movement was the soil out of which the Pentecostalism. Pentecostalism took the modern Pentecostal. What I'm saying is, it took the second blessing and said it's not unto quote sanctification, but unto signs and wonders. And it sort of took that. Well, I mean that's factually, I think historically, factually, but I think that has morphed some over the 110 or 15 years. The last part of the 20th century. Century. You can say it either way.
I think the 20th century
is
great.
Either way. But the last part of the 20th century saw a huge change. We talked about this before. I think Promise Keepers and just the sort of the melding of the denominations.
Yeah. I think part of it is where I'm at as well. I am a product of a fairly moderate. I don't want to say moderate because we believe pretty fully, but we are not a fringe Pentecostal. We're not like anti-orthodoxy Pentecostal. Like sometimes there are churches that I've seen that are Pentecostal.
The oneness Pentecostals.
At the sake of...
And
when we say
more extreme Pentecostals.
We simply mean separating ourselves from a life of sin and looking more and more like Jesus.
And anyone who doesn't believe that is
crazy.
Well, I don't know, crazy would... Okay,
so here's what I want to ask. To rope in ministry, the church, and sanctification, what is the job of the church in society right now or in the world? Is it for the believer?
To do everything like we did it in the 50s and 60s.
Okay, other than that...
which is, by the way, kind of what your grandfather used to...
The church in the 50s
It's his birthday
60s.
Today? Is it the 28th?
It is the 28th.
Happy
birthday in heaven,
your
Gramps.
Grandfather's 93rd birthday today. And your brother's... 38th birthday.
Yes. Yeah, Josh is...
But, and Saddam Hussein's birthday as well. But he is not in heaven. He is your brother, your grandfather, and Saddam Hussein. Happy birthday to all of them.
Speaking of sanctification, Gramps and Saddam took slightly different paths.
Paths. I don't think he was either second blessing unto holiness or the signs and wonders.
I really don't want to go down this path. Okay. The church.
I always try to add stuff.
What do you think? Is the church the place that we invite people to hear a gospel presentation and be evangelistic? Or is the church a place where the believers come together to build each other up?
I assume you're asking me that, not... I mean, I have always taught believers church.
Okay.
I think the church is the place where believers. I mean, the church should be evangelistic. I hope that, and I've done it. I've failed in this.
Sure.
But I hope that I never preach a sermon that doesn't explain how a lost person can get saved.
Right.
Every sermon should include, every service in its singing and in its sermon, in everything, should include some form of, and I think a very clear form of the, we're sinners separated from God by our sin. Jesus died. Jesus lived the life we couldn't live. Paid the price. Rose from the dead, offered us life for, when we believe. We repent of our sins and trust Christ. I mean, there's some clear form of that. But I think primarily the gathering of believers is to encourage believers to go. I'm preaching the Great Commission on Sunday. By the way, we still as we now at the end of April 28th is my dad, my son's, and Saddam's birthday. That's today. We still have not officially released one of these, so
we won't record it.
This is number 9. We're gonna get around to this. We're just stocking up.
We're giving ourselves a buffer,
stocking up,
so we can keep releasing weekly. And when we miss,
and we are gonna, once the release starts, it will be a flood of
1 million subscribers.
A flood of yes.
All 7 of you that heard that are gonna feel
the flood, the tide of.
It's pretty niche. This is what I like about it. That we're not looking for. It is pretty niche.
But anyway,
so you believe in a believer's church?
Well, yeah. I mean, you were raised in my churches. We seldom had, I didn't do hard sell invitations or any of that.
Sure.
I do think that the church should be blatantly evangelistic. I think everything we do should be. I think outreach should be blatantly evangelistic. I think if we are doing outreach into the community and it's not evangelistic, then it's a waste of time. By and large, evangelistic outreach that's not evangelistic is, why? But
see, I have a slightly different take, only because as we sit right now, I have been pastoring a church for 5 weeks. We've existed for 5 Sundays from our launch date to now, and to some degree.
Well, by the way, you hadn't even started when we started taping these, so this
and now we have.
Now you're an experienced pastor with 5 weeks under your belt.
I know. 5 years of worship ministry and 5 weeks of lead. I can pretty much tell you anything you need to know.
Yes, and then someday you'll realize it was all wrong.
Yes, absolutely. No, I'm trying to temper my own
your expertise.
Yes, but to some degree, we wanted to do an outreach to our community to let people know about the launch of our church and what we were going to be doing. And so what we did, we set up inflatables. We got people there, and we just got our church people in contact with the community people to say, hey, we're doing this thing. And I had a guy, a ministry colleague. If he hears this, I'm not talking bad about him. This is just a difference in philosophy I want to tease out for a second. But I said, we just want to get our church people in proximity. Sorry about that.
Don't hit the microphone.
I won't. In proximity to the people of our community, and trust that the fact that our launch team, who are all pretty veteran Christians and want to be a part of an evangelistic thing, even if we're not going to pause the kids jumping on the inflatables to do a kids message, we want to get our church members in contact with the community members in order to show love and give value to the community, so that people go, oh, Beacon Church, they did this cool thing, so that over time there's a trust and a value in the community centered around our church's name, if you will. And then the hope is that once they know about that, then we can do things in the future to bring them to evangelism. And I had a guy tell me, he was working with me on putting this event on, and I said, man, we can do some small gospel things, like we're going to do some arts and crafts. We're going to have
the face painting. They did the.
And we had New Testaments and bands with basically the Romans Road to Salvation on them. We gave away a couple of those to the kids, and then we had T-shirts for our church, but nothing was blatantly evangelistic. And I said, we just want to show love to the community. And what he said was, are you really loving your community if you're not telling them about their sin and how they can come to Jesus? And I just said, what I actually said was, I hear you. I understand. We want to get to that. What I said on the inside of me was, yes, I can absolutely love my community without telling them about sin.
Okay, let me wade through that. Yes, I fully agree with him. But every single, okay, I did halftime devotionals for Upward for 15 years.
These are elementary school basketball games.
Every single one of those wasn't a gospel presentation. Right. I did, I tried to make every one of them meaningful. Well, sure. No, the first week of the year, we just talked about why Upward was different. Sure. But I did throw in that we were distinctively Christian. Yeah. But by the end of the year, I had clearly presented. Now, you could have come to one of them, and one time I might have just talked about, the importance of thinking eternally or something, sure. But during the year, I think having at the beginning of your entrance into that community, having a thing that just introduces you to the community. You did have, I know my wife was face painting. Your mother?
Yeah, I've met
your
her.
Mother, my wife, was doing face painting, and they did the whole.
And they told a lot of kids
they told the gospel to kids. So there was a gospel outlet there.
Yes.
I don't think
it wasn't primary, but
no, but I don't think that I wasn't offended. Right. Not that whether I was offended or not was the key. I know that
if you were, I would have kind of taken this.
No, but I wasn't. I wasn't. I don't know why you would have done that, but no, but I don't think that. I don't think that was the key issue. Here's the problem that I have, is that churches have taken that and they just do outreach after outreach after outreach, where all they do is, quote, show love to the community.
Right.
And they never move beyond that. They're showing love to the community, sure. attracting people into the church. And even when people come into the church, they're not really going much beyond, hey, glad to have you here.
I think that might be a little bit. I think you can do both and. I think you can show love to the community.
Sure. But the problem is,
the pew, give them
and of course, I am hampered here by the fact that my philosophy is to regularly attend the church that gives me money.
Yes.
I have had for 40 years, I have had a policy that I regularly attend the church on Sunday morning that gives me money.
That pays you to be there.
I go where I'm paid. I'm a mercenary. Yeah. I'm a missional mercenary.
A mercenary?
Mercenary. I'm a mercenary. But I hear stories, and so, these stories can be filtered.
Yes.
But I do think a lot of them are real, and of churches where, like, I remember back in Virginia when my first pastorate, first I was an associate pastor, but I would preach the gospel, and people would say, I can't remember the last time I heard someone preach like that.
Sure.
Where they just told the gospel like that.
Right.
And I'm like, and this is in the Bible Belt in Virginia, sure. Baptist churches on every corner,
right.
as well as Methodist and Episcopal, right. and Presbyterian, but and a few assemblies here and there, but sure. They weren't quite as strong in that neck of the woods, at least.
Yeah.
But I do think there's some credibility to some of the idea that we have taken the whole idea, and I've been invited to be a part of a lot of outreaches, community-wide outreaches, where they say, well, we're just going to show love to the community, but we're not going to share the gospel. And I nope out of there, because if we're going to do these community outreach, we don't have to, have people with big Bibles like the one I have over there, sure. that smack people in the face. But if we're going to, if right. we are going to invest money as a church into a community outreach, there has to be a gospel
sure.
focus to it, or we're not going to throw a whole bunch of money into a community. Pardon the offense here, but if the Unitarians
Yes.
and the liberal churches can join in without being offended by what we're doing, then I don't really want to be a part of it. I want to be a part of something that, now, once again, I'm not condemning what you, because I was there.
Sure, yeah.
And I had a great time with my grandkids, and I thought what you were doing was great.
Yeah. For
a church coming into a community, if that's all you're doing 3 years from now, then I'm going to say, why bother?
Yep.
Because it has to be leading into if all, when the first year or two, I just sat and watched what we were doing with Upward.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I'm not going to name the church, but I was coaching a team that they were at another church that was doing the devotionals. Mm-hmm. The devotionals were useless. Pardon my judgmental opinion.
Sure.
And that's one of the reasons why we eventually, I don't know what was going on I know Morningside Assembly was doing them. I assume they were better there. It was not Morningside Assembly.
I don't know.
But at that time, we had 4 churches involved. Mm-hmm. Morningside Assembly was one of them. But at this church, and in fact, the guy who was running it at that church was really frustrated because his own pastors, he says, we talk about we want to get people in here and reach out. And here we have all these kids here, and no one will even bother to come in and share a word,
gotcha.
And he was frustrated. And eventually now he's at another gospel church in town,
sure.
More gospel focused church.
Let me throw you a very modern model that, and I'm not even totally sold on it. I think but a lot of common church thinking is now that life transformation happens best in a small group setting. So what we're going to do is we're going to treat church like a funnel.
If you say stuff like doing life together, I will reach across and strengthen. Doing life together, if you say...
At a certain point you don't like the younger generation's lingo, that's fine.
Yeah, no,
that's fine.
It's not that. I will have to hurt you.
No, so my thinking, I'm just trying to poke at a
I went to a conference last week, and the guy used...
all the cliches.
All the stream doing.
I went to a conference earlier this week, and I had a counter on my phone for every time someone from the stage said "for such a time as this."
Oh, I hate that phrase. Well, that's a joke. That's a joke among us.
Yeah.
Among us.
Yeah. It's
God's. Whenever someone is nominated for a position in the Southern Baptist Convention,
it's for such a time as
God's
this.
man for such a time as this, and we always make a joke about it. My little group of guys.
Okay.
Anyway, all right.
I think a lot of churches are taking the funnel mentality of
for such a time as
business.
This.
Oh, shut up. So
was that respectful?
You take
I'm
community
sorry.
events where you
his mother did not always train him well.
You cast a very wide net with your community events to get people in the front door.
Okay.
And then when they're in the front door, you do
beat them
some
around the
engagement
head.
Where you try to encourage them. You try to say, let's do great spiritual things together. And then you encourage them to really study the Bible in a small group format where, like a dozen or less, where people can study together, people can hold you accountable, people know what's going on in your life, because it's really impossible for one pastor, if you have a congregation of, let's say, 100 people, that one person can't really be right one-on-one with 100 people, right? But in a small group. So what I'm hearing is that the modern idea that you do big community events where you give away a bunch of groceries and get your name out in the community so that hopefully people see your church and go, I want to try that church on a Sunday. And they go to your church on a Sunday and they feel really encouraged and really challenged. And, it might be a little bit more seeker sensitive, has a lot of stuff attached to it, but maybe seeker focused, where they view the purpose of the Sunday morning gathering of the church to distribute people to a midweek, smaller scale Bible study. So what I'm hearing from you is that maybe you don't think that that's as effective. Two cliches.
How
good is a small group leader? That's one big caveat.
Yes.
Let's assume the small group leader is dynamite.
Well,
those 12 people that really
care
about each
other. Small groups. If your small groups are good, that will work. Most I've not. A lot of what I hear about small groups is that a lot of times they don't follow through. I was in a church that was built around small groups. This was 40 years ago, and it was pretty good. Two cliches, because everything is two cliches for such a time as this. One is the danger of a mile wide and an inch deep.
Sure.
And that is the way that mega churches are built. What you're talking about is essentially the pattern that Willow Creek and
it is the mega church.
It's the California
Hybels?
guy.
No,
Hybels, Willow Creek was Rick Warren.
Yeah.
He had the first base, second base, third base home. First base was
the deep and wide.
Well,
was that
the
Stanley?
first base was getting people into the church.
Sure.
And that was a real low commitment. Yeah. And I'm not going to say this right because it was never my model. I was more of the believer's church.
Yeah.
Teach the word and but get people into just get them in by hook or by crook. He wouldn't say it that way.
Yeah.
Second base was some low level of commitment to a small group, and then get them really into commitment and service. And then I think home base was training, reproduction,
going into ministry,
going into them doing leadership ministry training, and your goal was to get them in the door. And to be honest, he's been really successful at doing it. So if I look at his get them in the door, I'm like, that is really weak.
Yeah.
But the problem that happened with an awful lot of, like I saw, there was a church in Cedar Rapids that took the Hybels Warren model, but all they did was use the get them in the door, and they didn't really focus on they didn't follow through. And I've seen a lot of churches do that, where all they do is they get them in the door, and they give lip service to the second base, third base, home plate. But now I have to say, Rick Warren takes especially from, I think we've used the term Theo Bros. It's very common in the SPC.
I don't know.
Well,
I'm not in that world.
No, but it's generally speaking Reformed guys and gals who are critical of everyone else who doesn't. But they hate Rick Warren. They consider him a heretic.
Why is that? Just because of what he preaches?
Yeah, because he does it this way. Well, a little bit of both. But because he lowers the bar to get people in, but he has been very successful at keeping the first base, second base, third. He's been very successful at reproducing disciples, and he has brought people along. Mm-hmm. A lot of the churches have not. A lot of the churches adopted his model of growing a big church, but not reproducing disciples. Yeah. And so his model is really dangerous.
Don't you think that's hard? Like the deeper you go in each of those, don't you think it would be harder and harder to see from the outside? Like it's easy to look at. There's only one church in town here that has done a really good job of getting a ton of people in the front door. And I have a lot of friends who are on the inside of it that feel like they've really had a lot of life given to them and been challenged. Then I have some friends who have come out of it saying, oh, it didn't work. It's just this, it's just that. So I hear conflicting reports, but it would seem to me that it's easy to see when a church's attendance triples and they build a giant building.
Right.
And it's hard to see the real life transformation of developing leaders. And
you can see some of the fruit, but yeah, there is some truth to that. But with what you can see is a church that doesn't set like, for instance, I know of churches that specifically refuse to take moral stands because they will offend culture and
it'll cut off
diminish. We're not going to take a stand against something. And I personally don't think churches should be Democrat or Republican. In my circle, I don't think a church should be a local outpost of the GOP. I think churches should be. I think there are moral issues, abortion and things like that, where we should take strong stands because they are moral, I think, biblically based issues. But But I think when we start saying, well, we're not going to take a stand on sexual issues, sexual behavior issues, because the culture says this or that, then there's a tendency to cater to the culture. So
sure.
I have seen that in certain churches. But yeah, the other aspect of this is, and if you are doing good at going from first base to second base to third base, it may not be as true. But the adage, for such a time as this, the adage is, what you do to attract, you have to do to maintain.
Yes.
If you use circus, if you use
helicopter drop of Easter eggs,
if you use that to attract people, then you got to do that.
That's what and
the whole drug addict principle. What you did this time, you got to up your game.
Yeah.
So
dragon.
if your pastor rode in on a motorcycle this week,
right,
then he's going to have to airlift in next week, and then the next time, he's going to have to come in on a guy wire, and it's going to, you're going to have to up your game. So
clearly, you're not a huge fan of some of the proclivities of what seems to be the modern structure of church.
No,
But do you?
Please let me. I'm not against.
As long as
what I am against is, what I'm against is downplaying. I don't think that structure and form is so much the issue. I really, what I would like to do, you have this experience, same as I do. If I was starting a church, now I'm probably not going to start a church because, first of all,
it takes a lot of time and money.
Well, I just
that's what I've already learned in the last couple of years.
I don't think it's my personality to be a starter. I'm more of a church maintainer, so I don't know that I have the personality to start a church, to be that kind of a guy.
Yep.
But I would want to do something like what they were doing in Taiwan,
right?
Where they have they worship.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like that term because I think worship is more than singing.
They have a music time.
They have a music time. They have a preaching time. They break down in groups and discuss it, and then they have meetings during. There's a term for it. It's called simple church. I think
that's a whole book. That's got a whole.
Well, simple church. I don't know whose book you're thinking of. Tom Rayner, a friend of mine named Tom Rayner. I say, well, yeah. I mean, he threw a pen at me one time.
Yeah.
In anger.
He seems like a jerk.
No, he was.
I'm sure he's wonderful.
No, he's a good guy.
I read that in my build up to starting the church. That book was actually very influential on me. But
I actually haven't read the book, but
it's less important about the simple church idea. Is the more simple and the more intentional your discipleship structure is in your church, the more likely it is to yield results.
I would have
it's convoluted and
I would have simple worship, not simple preaching, but biblical preaching.
Yeah.
A response time, not so much, 4 verses of just as I am, but a time for people to see. That's one of the
Instead
things
of
that
small groups on a Tuesday night.
That's no. I don't necessarily. I think break down into small groups for 15 or 20 minutes, and then maybe have those same small groups say, let's get together for fellowship and prayer and all that on Thursday night or Tuesday night, and then do ministry elsewhere, but have a simple, and I think that a lot of the other stuff we do is arguing over skubala.
Yeah, well,
that's a Greek term. That's a Greek term.
How would you interpret that accurately into English?
Bullshit. Actually,
bull dung.
It's the word dung.
Yeah.
But it's actually a kind of a crass word. Paul used it. in and the more accurate translation would get most preachers fired.
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
But it's not necessarily a really.
It was not a church friendly word.
It would have probably caused a lot of gasps when he said, "I count it all skubala that I might know Christ and be found in Him."
Yeah. Some of my favorite people on earth are the "I love Jesus but I cuss a little" people. I think Paul was one of them. I get it.
Paul. Okay, I'm gonna. It really offends me when people use the Lord's name in vain. And I don't particularly think that we ought to go out of our way to be potty mouths.
Yeah.
But by the same token, Paul did, in Galatians, Paul said, I would that they were cut off who trouble you. And it's a play on words. He says, they're so, this may be one where people wish they didn't have the visual, but he says, they're so circumcision. They said they're so concerned about circumcision. I would that they would just cut off. In other words, I wish that they would just emasculate themselves. In katatome instead of peritome, if you know the Greek. Just cut it off instead of cut around it.
I'm hearing. I think that's awesome.
Okay, what I was going to say is, we get so worried about whether we should go off the rail with panem et circenses, bread and circumcises, all the entertainment, or whether we should go with the traditions, the old traditions, or formal traditional worship, or all of this. And I don't want to argue for let's do it the way we did in the 50s and 60s, because I'm frustrated with traditional worship.
Yeah.
But I don't think that the modern traditions are that much better. I don't think they're inherently better.
I think they're equal, and that's a long conversation.
I had a guy ask me one time. I said,
"Worship opinions."
Well, well, maybe we could discuss that sometime. That's where, when we discuss the Bible, maybe I have a few advantages from 50 years of study and all that. Yeah. But when we start with the other, you might have a little bit of an advantage on me, but with a degree in music. Yes. But I had a guy ask me one time, does your church sing that funeral music? And I've had other people, it's like, if well, you've been involved in discussions where people were like, if God just likes old music better, and I just think that's the silliest. I think those kinds of old ways versus new ways, old paths versus, I think if we just got back to 1 Corinthians 14, everybody, you gather together, you sing, you pray, you preach, you open the word, you respond, you share, and but all of our services, small, large, they're designed to prevent us from doing what the Bible says we should do. There are I think some small groups, even small groups now.
By that again, you think the design of our church services are keeping us from what we're supposed to do?
In general, most worship services are not designed to allow people to do what they're supposed to do in Christian worship.
Okay.
In general.
Are you holding up what we should do as what the early church did, or just...
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and I think one of the keys is that the model should always not. I have grown up in churches where the model was the church. I loved my dad. My dad was my idol, and I mean that in a good way and a bad way.
Right.
One of the things that God had to do as He grew me up was teach me that I followed Christ, not Lou.
Right.
Yeah.
I haven't had that issue, surprisingly.
Yeah, smart aleck. Nobody likes you.
Sorry.
But Dad always had the model of church. Now, he would quarrel with me, but I think he one time said to me, if we just did things now the way we did things back in the 50s and 60s, the
world would be saved.
The church would grow, the church would be good, everything would be fine.
Yeah. So my thinking, if I had to nail it down, is that I see, kind of two binary sides of a weird church argument.
Well, I don't want to get into the binary discussion.
Well, I certainly don't want to get into the non-binary discussion.
Well, yeah, I don't really want to go there.
I think let's cast the net wide and get them into church to get them saved. And I think there's also error to be had, and what I see is the other side of the pendulum of just preach the word and don't think about anything else. I've seen some people and pastors and ministries, and I don't include yours as one of them, where basically they said, if a pastor just preaches well enough, everything else takes care of itself. And you don't, all this leadership stuff that pastors are obsessed with now is nonsense. If you just preach the Bible well enough, that is everything that a church needs to be healthy.
Okay.
I think that's a problem. Do you need healthy?
Everything, every truth in the Bible is held in tension with another truth.
Okay.
And every dogmatic statement is probably an overstatement.
Sure.
So do I believe that the key to do I believe that the key to the church is the sound exegetical, expositional preaching of the word? I absolutely do. Mm-hmm. I think that a church where the preacher preaches the word mm-hmm. consistently, faithfully, seeks to live it, operates according to it, where the word is preached, I think it solves a lot of problems. Do I think that if you just preach the word, all other problems are solved and you don't have to do anything else? Right. Well, no. Yeah. That's dumb. Yeah. Okay, no, you still have to have Sunday school classes, small groups. You still have to take up an offering.
You have to balance a budget.
You still, yes. You still have to do other things. See, that's where we always there. It's like the pendulum swing, you know. Yeah. And I believe it's like saying the pendulum goes back and forth. Biblical preaching is the root of solid ministry, but it's not the only thing. The pendulum swung back in my early days away from biblical preaching. You've got to be a church administrator. You've got to be a CEO. You've got to be out there doing this. Yeah. And then it swung back to basically, I remember there was a time where people were emphasizing, well, the pastor's office used to be called the pastor's study.
Yeah.
Well, it was. Yeah. Why? Because that's where the pastor studied, so he could preach a biblical sermon. Fine. But when they started emphasizing that, then preachers stopped visiting people.
Yeah.
Well, you know, if one of your members is in the hospital, you kind of got to go see him.
Yeah.
It's a part of what you do. Yeah. And so the pendulum swung back to my only job is to deliver a biblical message on Sunday, and if you're in the hospital, that's your problem.
Yeah, I was at a conference earlier this week, and there was a rural pastor from Wyoming speaking to rural pastors from South Dakota, specifically at a breakfast, and he said, if you're so busy at your desk writing your sermon that you never get out in the community and see the people, he said you're just a bad pastor.
Right,
I mean, you're just a bad
100%. On the other hand, if he says, download your sermon off the internet so that you can be out there,
or in the Pentecostal sphere, open a text on Sunday morning and hope the Spirit gives you enough insight to just fill a pulpit.
It does. See, I wrote an article recently, and I can't remember what I titled it. I might have used the term binary, but it's the idea that we take everything to the on the continuum. Yeah. If you're not here, then you must be here.
Sure.
One of our big discussions has been Calvinism versus, well, they called it traditionalism. Well, it's not really Arminianism, because there are very few Southern Baptists that are actually Arminian. Okay. They tend more to be moderate Calvinist,
a mixture,
traditionalist, non-Calvinist, whatever term you want to use. But I hold a position. I call it antinomism. I can't even say it, but it's a moderate position, which is moderate in itself is a bad word in the SBC for reasons I can't get into. But it's a moderate position, and on both sides they say no, you can't be in the middle. You either have to be way over here or way over there. Yeah. The same thing is true politically. I am now, and this could get me killed, but I am now an independent.
Yeah,
I am not a Republican or a Democrat. But the Democrats tell me, if you're not with us, then you are with them, fascist, no good,
neo-Nazi,
and fascist, neo-Nazi, whatever. And I lost a good friend because I didn't think some of the things that the last president did, I didn't like some of them. And he told me because I didn't support him 100%, I was a pro-abortion liberal. I was pro-abortion.
Because you didn't kiss Donald Trump's
I have never voted. I made a commitment over 40 years ago that I would never vote for somebody who was pro-abortion on a national. I don't really know that you can make that, for the local
city
water, the water conservation thing.
School
but
board or whatever.
Whatever. I probably would if I knew on school board.
Sure.
But I have never voted for anyone who is pro-abortion, because if you think that killing babies is okay, then to me, you don't get my vote. But I was pro-abortion because I criticized, specifically, I criticized Donald Trump's actions on January 6th, the insurrection. Well, I thought that some of the things he said helped to foment the violence that took place. And he said, because you criticized Donald Trump, you are pro-abortion, and I cannot support you anymore. And I lost a friend over that. Because so if you're not 100% on this side, then I was told I was a Hillary voter.
By not voting for him,
if I didn't support him, then I'm a Hillary voter. If I'm not a Hillary voter, then I must. You cannot be. We do not allow people to be in the middle anymore. You cannot be in the middle. You have to be either on one side completely or the other. And I generally think the truth on a lot of it. Well, I don't even remember what the issue was we were discussing, but I started.
Just preach the gospel and everything else be fine, or cast a wide net, have a church discipleship.
I think if you are not actively preaching most of the time, verse by verse through a book, I think that's the best way. It doesn't have to be, when I don't do it, your mom does. She's like, why don't you go verse by verse through a book? But sometimes like I did the Holy Spirit. I took 53 sermons and I did the Holy Spirit. And I did verse by verse through select. I didn't go through a whole book, but I did, and I'll do subjects, but I'll still do a text. It'll just be this text. It'll be this text this week and this text next week.
Yeah.
But if you're not preaching the word, I think you're inviting problems in your church.
You're certainly inviting your own bias. That's what I've found.
Yes.
If you're taking topical week to week whatever I want to preach on, you end up preaching the same four things that you care about repackaged.
You tend to, yes, absolutely. And yes. And so I really believe in word-driven, text-driven. Text-driven is the expositional sermons has kind of faded out. Now it's text-driven messages.
Sure.
But whatever, it's the same thing. It's just a different word because we like to change wording to show that we're hip.
Crusty,
so that we're hip. And I'm a hipster. I'm a total.
Okay,
to finish the statement, I believe in that, but I don't believe only in that, and that's a lot of the Theo bro. A lot of the Theo bros will be the ones who say, if you just preach the word, everything else. Is okay.
I will get you that preaching the word and a solid biblical literacy in your congregation must be the cornerstone.
Yes.
But a cornerstone isn't a building. You've got to build from there. It's got to be based on that.
Okay, that's a good. But you got to expand from there, or you don't have an actual functional shelter, right? Right.
That's kind of where I get here. I was following a guy named Torsten Moritz.
There's your problem.
Do you know who he is?
No, if a guy's named Torsten.
Well, he's not from America.
Well, then there's your problem.
But
America first.
He is great. You should vote for Trump, I guess.
We've really lost. Of our 7 viewers, 4 have just turned us off.
I forget. He's from a European country. He's originally from Europe, but he tours all across America.
I'm guessing if his name's Torsten, he's from Finland or Sweden.
I don't know specifically.
Maybe Iceland.
Yeah, I don't know specifically, and I'm not going to posit a guess, but he is he's a seminarian, and he's a professor, and he actually travels and is doing a lot of study right now. But he has a great TikTok account called Prohibition Theology. I love his TikTok account. And he talks a lot about interpretation, but he did this one series of them. And TikTok, you can do 3-minute videos. It was a 3-minute video.
I didn't realize there was a time limit on those.
Yeah. Okay. He said I'm from Europe, and he said one thing I have noticed, because he has a large following and he lectures a lot in America. He says that Americans uniquely something about our cultural makeup now is that the divide between stances has been widened.
Oh.
And the hostility between stances is divided. And he's like, someone like me who's kind of in the middle on a lot of things, there's no bandwidth left to listen to the middle, because you are handed a package and you say, you either believe this package, you believe these 5 points that have a flower acronym, or and if you believe that, then you have to believe all of it, and you can never compromise any of it, or you're compromising the gospel. Or you get handed these 5 arguments that were designed as a riposte to those 5 arguments.
Well, yeah, I mean,
and
that's kind
he
of
said it was a uniquely American problem. So I don't know what it is.
Well,
about
I don't
culture.
know that because I studied. I've been doing a church history study on Wednesday nights. And I mean the whole Reformation difference between the Arminian, what's the refutation of Calvinism that Arminians wrote,
it's 5 points of something or doodle, right?
Yeah, and I know it. You're some of your ancestors actually signed the anti-Calvinist document, the 5 your mother's ancestors, not mine, but your mother's.
That's where we all went wrong, I guess.
Yeah, and then the Calvinists came along with the Dort Confession that settled in the tulip, basically.
Yes.
Years later, I'll think of that, the name of that in a moment. But
I would love it if we could learn how to have civil discussions, and I think it would trickle to every aspect, whether it's politically, whether it's spiritually.
It's not just American. I mean, they put people to death in Europe because of that.
Yes.
Maybe they've learned now.
He's saying right now, in this moment in history, it seems like Americans are uniquely
within
divided.
the Southern Baptist Convention right now, when you look at Southern Baptists as a whole, we are a pretty narrow segment of the church.
Yes.
And yet there are 2 groups, one called the CBN and another called Founders. Mm-hmm. And the strange thing is the Founders are hardcore Calvinists and the CBN are not. But they have united to designate the rest of us as woke liberals.
Okay.
And I mean, I'm about as woke and liberal as...
Yeah, if anyone's listened to the first 8 episodes, they never once called you a woke liberal.
No, I am not a woke liberal.
Other
but
than
I
you
am.
Said maybe Donald Trump contributed to January 6th.
Within the Southern Baptist Convention, there are these 2 groups would say, "Oh yeah, Dave Miller, he is a woke liberal." I am known as a woke liberal.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Ben. I grew up with Dave Miller in his house, and I can promise you, he is the least woke person. I can't tell you the things I've seen behind closed doors.
No.
If you go to woke liberal in the dictionary, and then you go to like the opposites of definition, that guy is in there. So
But I am known as a woke liberal, and it's because because I've taken positions like on issues, I don't just automatically line up lockstep with the GOP, and I don't think that the SBC ought to be GOP headquarters. I don't think we ought to be. And so I am known not because I mean my positions, I guess I have a couple of positions. Like, for instance, I think that we should not treat immigrants as if they all have
the plague or
the
whatever.
plague. Yeah, I think we ought to treat them
100%.
with humanity.
Yes.
And so in some circles that's considered to be woke.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we ought to have a solid border and all, but I'm just saying we are this small spectrum, and yet we have come to this point where I am such a conservative, and I am called a woke liberal all the time. Yeah. I am called unredeemed and a liberal because I don't 100% identify with the Donald Trump wing of the Republican Party, and because I don't 100% agree with the GOP, I don't line up 100%. I am called a woke liberal, and I don't.
It's crazy because like if progressive liberal was a 1, and far right proto Trump, like Republican with
Pro-Trump.
a 10. You're like an 8.5 or a 9.
I'm on my views. I'm probably in the 7 or 8 range.
Yeah, you're
and all Southern
skewed to
Baptists
one side.
are, but that's what
because you're not an absolute
Forston, whatever his name was.
Moritz,
he's pretty much right.
Yeah.
He may be the Moritz part's German, but
I don't know his nationality.
Okay,
so
but I'm just saying he's right in that these groups have just anybody that doesn't line. That's what we call them, the Theo Bros.
Yeah.
Anybody that doesn't line up 100% with a Theo Bro is anathematized. If you don't line up 100% with me, then you are out of the kingdom.
Yeah.
And that's why I think it's really important to read a book called Brick Walls and Picket Fences.
$12.99.
$12.97 at Amazon.com.
We are at our time, but we should pick up this conversation again because I feel as there's a lot more here. But under the title of Sanctification, the Church and Its Mission, and the Ministry, I feel like I would feel remiss if we didn't end this by at least saying that
I'm right and you're wrong.
Without Christian unity and without the ability to move forward and with people that we disagree with, I don't know if the church in America can accomplish its mission.
But see, this is why these guys do that. They do not want to be unified with charismatics and Pentecostals, with woke liberals, with anybody that doesn't. So what they do is they classify all charismatics as Kenneth Copeland, Kenneth Hagin, Word of Faith.
Oh, I've heard it all.
Crazies.
Anyone who likes John MacArthur hates me before they even know me.
and me. Well, I used to be a big fan of John, but I
have a personal prayer language. I still study the Bible.
And so because I am having a dialogue with you,
You're a sellout.
A sellout.
Yeah.
And I feel that way sometimes. But the woke liberal, They call me a woke liberal, and by calling me a woke liberal, they don't have to be united with me.
Sure.
And what I'm saying is, I think the Southern Baptist Convention, one of my best friends in the Southern Baptist Convention has a private prayer language.
Sure. You're going to out them here on,
Well, no, I don't have to out him. Dwight McKissick.
He's a great guy.
He's very. Yeah, you think so. I won't go into why. But Dwight has been very public about that.
Yeah.
And I think that's fine. And I don't have a problem with him being in the SBC. And I don't have a problem with Tom Askell and Tom Buck being in the SBC. I do now because they want to get rid of everybody who doesn't agree with them. I have problems with them, not because of their beliefs. I think Calvinists should be welcome, hardcore 5-point Calvinists.
Yes.
Open the door, let them in.
Yes.
And then the CBN guys who are more traditionalists, anti-Calvinists, right-wingers, let them in. Fundamentalists, let them in.
Yeah.
But as soon as they start saying anybody who doesn't agree with us has to go out the door, then I have a problem. And and I think that's the problem. And I think that we have to. And that problem is in the SBC, and that problem is in the church as a whole, that we don't want to fellowship with anybody that doesn't agree 100% with us, and that kills the church. It gives us a bad reputation in the community.
From what I have seen on social media, the single thing that has driven more people away from the church, burned more people, hurt more people from the church, is the kind of the like you said, kind of dogmatic. You are either hyper conservative or you're of the pits of Hades. It has been damaging and is still, I think, damaging the witness of Christ in the world to be so hyper intense about that.
I think number one right now is the tendency of the church, and this is left and right, to sanctify politics. And I think that's happened in the last 5-6 years. Is that we've always been doing that since the moral majority.
Yeah, but you idealize your position.
If you don't agree with me politically, then you're not faithful to Christ. But I've been studying church history, and And that was done back in the Revolutionary period. To honor Christ, you have to be a loyal patriot of America. That was actually preached in pulpits.
Sure, yeah.
So anyway, and I think one of the biggest things is the failure to recognize that I'm right and you're wrong. Boom, let's go. We'll see you next week on
I'm stopping.
Generational Cursing.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and